She's almost as though she's setting herself up.
Yeah, I feel like kind of strange that.
Yeah, I got that feeling.
Are you sitting?
Okay, I'd like to call to order the April 15th Tredyffrin Board of Supervisors meeting.
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
So we have some guests here to present a check for a grant that Mr. Steve Burgo or Mr. Burgo, our township engineer, has worked on quite a bit. Steve, you want to do the introductions?
Certainly. Tonight we have Senator Carolyn Committa and Representative Melissa Schusterman here. Just a couple words quickly about our project for stormwater. In December of 2023, we received word that a H2OPA stormwater grant that we had applied for was awarded $2.2 million. This project will cover actually two projects, Willis, Woodcrest, and Upper Wheatley, our stormwater project in the amount of about $1.88 million. And additional funding for this grant is for Gregory Lane for our Phase 1 stormwater project in about $313,000. Both of these projects are going to help the township in reducing stormwater runoff that flows into Trout Creek from already developed areas of the township. It's going to help us with reducing flooding and erosion in the Devon State Road and Upper Wheatley tributaries of Trout Creek. This will help us in moving forward with a lot of our MS4 requirements, but also helping all of our property owners who live downstream and along these sections of Trout Creek. And Trout Creek is one of our biggest and most important areas that we've seen with flooding and stormwater issues. So we wanted to thank Senator Committa and Representative Schusterman for their support, both on these two grants as well as their continued support on our other stormwater grants. And we think we have them here today, so we wanted to give them a chance to say a couple words.
Thank you, Steve. It's going to take two of us to hold up this really big check. First, we'll show. See, just and then you can see we did. Isn't that great? Yes, yes, indeed. But please, yeah, good idea.
I'll let them talk and I'll do a picture. Okay, absolutely.
Okay.
Of course.
So wow, that's really loud. I'm State Senator Carolyn Committa, and I'm delighted to be here with my good friend, Representative Melissa Schusterman, and all of our friends in Tredyffrin. Having been a council member in Westchester, a mayor in Westchester, I remember when these big checks would come. They didn't always come like that big, but this is really, really important. We were just talking about, with Steve, about the stormwater needs just keep growing and growing and growing. And we were talking with Tom about the Arboretum, and in fact, that's where I learned about the Trout Creek problems and so on. So it is really an honor and a delight to be with you, and really great that we can direct some of your taxpayer dollars back to Tredyffrin Township. So congratulations, and let me pass the microphone to my dear friend and your state representative, Melissa Schusterman.
Thank you, Senator. I just want to add to that comment. When Josh Shapiro, our governor, came into office, he has, I'll stand over here, he has a liaison that works with us to talk about our priorities. So I remember getting that phone call and saying, okay, you're not going to believe this, but it's stormwater, and we're going to make stormwater sexy. And he's like, okay, I'm leaning in, because a lot of districts have a myriad of issues, and I'm not saying it's our only issue, but speaking to our engineers, living here and driving through the area in a low-to-the-ground car, we haven't only witnessed it, we've almost had a myriad of disasters during these 100-year storms that come over and over again. So I just want to say, you know, I'm happy to bring back this money with this senator, but also continue talking about our number one most sexy issue, stormwater. Thank you.
You going landscape portrait?
That's a nice way to start the meeting. Announcements. Reminder for any property owners who have not submitted the annual stormwater inspection reports to the engineering department. They were due by April 1st. Please submit them before April 30th to avoid notice of violation. Property owners have a grace period until the 1st of May to get their reports submitted this year, so please get them done and submitted as soon as possible. The next item is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the March 18th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments? Any public comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. Now we have the supervisor liaison reports. Supervisor Humble.
Thank you. The Parks and Recreation Board met last week on Wednesday, April the 10th. Items up for discussion were the regular reports of the police report, the public works report, and the Parks and Rec report. Old business involved finance director giving us an update about Friendship Park, which has been in discussions with the board lately about what it would take to renovate the park. We also discussed upcoming community events. As you know, in the summertime, we have the summer concert season, which is a really big deal for everybody to come out every Thursday for the series. New business was finalization of our end-of-year report, and then we received updates on Deer Management, Park Foundation, and our liaison with the Environmental Action Council. The date of the next meeting is May 8th, 2024. 7 p.m. Thank you.
No reports tonight, as we are going to have a awesome Historical Commission annual review by our chair, Robert Williams, later today. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Gussie.
No reports tonight.
Thank you. I attended the zoning hearing board meeting for Supervisor Carlotta Pugh Johnson, on the 28th of March at 7 o'clock. They denied Appeal 5-24, and I do not remember what it was about. They just voted to deny it from the prior meetings. They just announced that. They approved 724, which is the high school fields, with a whole list of specifics around parking, safe pedestrian access during construction, safe pedestrian access after construction, school bus circulation routes, school bus idling zones, sufficient student parking and overflow parking during 6 special events they had scheduled each year. So there's a lot of provisions that went with that, but that was approved. There was 10-24, which was a variance to on setbacks for a garage that was wanted to be built on South Valley Road, and that was approved. Appeal 11-24 was the application of the Picket Post Swim Club for additional paddle tennis court was continued. And then we had Appeal 12-24, which was for a dog boarding center in the parking lot where the Target is, or the Kmart and Target are. So there's an outbuilding in that parking lot, and that was approved with some limitations. And that was the report from the meeting. Thank you. Supervisor Wysocki.
I don't have a formal planning commission report tonight, but I have some information to convey and a motion to make. First, the planning commission meeting scheduled for April 18 is canceled due to the absence of any current agenda items to be considered. The next planning commission meeting is on May 16. I want to thank Supervisor Carlotta Johnston Pugh for standing in for me on the March 21 Planning Committee meeting when I was away. Next, I have a motion, and I will make that motion. I move the appointment of Martin Bond to the Planning Commission.
I will second that motion. Any comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Supervisor Wysocki. Supervisor Bhaskar.
Chairman Miller?
Oh, sure.
If I could, I didn't realize we were going to make the motions within our reports. And so in the order on the agenda, I do have in here a motion to reappoint Patty Copeland to the Parks and Recreation Board. Can we take that up now?
I think you just started it.
Okay, thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor say aye.
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 That is appointed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Supervisor Bhaskar.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. So I'm going to start with a motion to appoint Peg McGarrity to the Library Board of Trustees.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. So,
Any comments? Okay, do you want to go ahead?
I just want to say a few words. So, we had the chance to meet Ms. McGarrity at the last Library Board of Trustees meeting. She's a 20-year resident of the town. She has a background in journalism and creative writing and marketing. She brings a lot of enthusiasm, and we really look forward to having her on the Library Board of Trustees.
Thank you. Any other comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
So next I have a motion to confirm Max Young to the Library Foundation Board.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comment? Yeah, I'd like to add a comment, which is that the Library Foundation Board is actually an independent 501c3 organization, and their bylaws basically require so they basically provide us with candidates. They get confirmed by the Library Board of Trustees, and then we basically confirm them as a courtesy to the Library Foundation. So we thank the Library Foundation for the work that they do, and certainly Mr. Young has shown a lot of enthusiasm for it, so I really look forward to confirming him.
Thank you, Supervisor Bhaskar. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Congratulations, Mac Young.
So now I'll move on with my regular reporting. So the Environmental Advisory Council met on Tuesday, March 26th, and Dale Klein, Samantha Whiteside, and Brandon Banaszewski were unanimously voted as associate members. Ray Clark of the Open Land Conservancy gave a presentation on a stream bank restoration project in the George Lorimer Preserve. The new channel held up under a 4-inch rainstorm, which is good, and the next step is a further restoration of habitat to support wildlife with a focus on birds and associated species. And I have to say that personally I'm looking forward to walking in the preserve. I couldn't find the parking lot when I looked. So Earth Day tree plantings are planned for Friday, April 19th and Saturday, April 20th. And then the Krabby Creek Garlic Mustard Pool is tentatively planned for May 10th and 11th. And a macroinvertebrate study is planned for Saturday, March 18th, and a flow calibration study to follow on Sunday, May 19th. The Environmental Advisory Council will have a table at the Upper Mainline YMCA Earth Fair on Saturday, April 20th from 10 to 2. And the EAC is looking for applicants to the Rain Garden Program, and there's a flyer at the back of the room. If you have a place where you think you could put a rain garden in your property, please apply for it. And then thanks to all the plastic bags that residents have been recycling, we have another Trex dark green bench that's on its way to the township. And the EAC also picked a date for the Roots Festival, which will be on Saturday, September 15th. Now, the EAC and the library held a joint lecture program at the Tredyffrin Public Library on the importance and how to care for big trees. And that was on April 10th. It was well attended and received by about 30 participants. And hopefully we'll be able to present this in other venues as well. So the next meeting of the EAC is tomorrow, April 16th. It would normally have been a week later, but someone scheduled in a primary election for that day, so I guess that takes precedence over the EAC meeting, so the EAC meeting will occur tomorrow. Now, moving on to the Library Board of Trustees. The Library Board of Trustees met on Thursday, March 28th, and the trustees recommended Peggy McGarity for the supervisors to appoint and Max Young, so we've already done that. And then the board discussed draft policies for the meeting rooms and for solicitation and charitable contributions on library property. The board also had some initial discussions on creating subcommittees, for example, on the bylaws, on strategic planning, on nominations to the board, so that right now what happens is when someone steps down from the Library Board of Trustees, then we start looking for someone to fill the role, whereas other groups like the EAC, for example, have an associate membership, so that provides a pool of people from whom someone can step up when there's a vacancy. And it was also noted that the bylaws need updating. With regard to attendance at the Stratford Library is increasing incrementally, but Paoli attendance has grown significantly year to year. And circulation continues to grow, with e-material circulation continuing to grow steadily. And also the Library Foundation still has openings, so please apply through the Foundation website. And the next meeting of the board will be on Thursday, April 25th in the Stratford Library. And I also have a small announcement, which is that the Homeowners Association of a large development in town is having their annual meeting today and has requested one of the supervisors to be there to listen to their concerns. So since it happens to be in my district, I'll be leaving after the Historical Commission annual review. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Chair Miller.
Thank you, Supervisor Bhaskar. Supervisor Johnson-Pugh.
Good evening. I am
I took the place of Murph Wasaki on March 21st for the planning meeting. There were 3 properties that were talked about, and one of them, which was at 311 South Valley Forge Road, they asked to be removed from that meeting, and I'm going to presume that they'll be back for the next month. The other 2 that they talked about, which was 105 Vincent Road, where it was zoned as a R3, that was approved, and I cannot remember which one the other one was, but it was approved too. It was like 3 different ones. Those 2 of them were approved. The 311s did not want to be on there, and that was basically it.
Thank you, Supervisor Johnson-Pugh. That concludes Supervisor Liaison reports. Next, we'll go to Historic Commission Annual Review with Historic Commission Chair Rob Williams.
Good evening, I'm Rob Williams. I'm the chair of the Historic Commission for the Township. Every year, each of our boards gives a review of what occurred in the past year and a little bit of a look ahead of what we're doing for the coming year. Just as a reminder of where the Historic Commission gets its roots, this is straight out of our Township Code. For the Historic Commission, we have several responsibilities. The integrity of the properties, most importantly, number B, to establish a process. This is really important. We don't have that process today. This is an activity which our commission is working on, and you'll hear more about it through the presentation. Find continued viable uses. It's always better if a property is used and doesn't fall into disrepair. Even old ones have adaptive reuses for, our era. Discourage demolition, which I'll report on, and then also to maintain the balance with our property rights. I underline the 3 words at the top: education, property rights, and general welfare. These 3 need to be in balance. It is a difficult job, but it's no different than any of the other public policy done at the municipal level. This is why we have zoning. This is why we have, many of the, policies and practices we do. So one of my jobs is to make sure these 3 are in balance. We're working against the comprehensive plan, which of course was enacted in 21. There are 8 recommendations for the historic preservation. That's chapter 3. We're marching against all 8 of them. We've completed the first, which was actually creating a strategic plan. That was done with the support of a state grant. We are a certified local government, and that was one of our projects. The additional funding came from the township as a cost match. We do have a survey it's an inventory really of all of our properties, 360, that was done back in 2023. It's a good starting point, but as pointed out, we need to update it. The real meat here is 3 and 4. To start looking at the ordinance that exists now, it's time for a relook, and I'll comment on what the state has told us. We have done well with grants, always looking for cost-effective ways to fund the activities which require expertise outside our township, and then looking for other funds. So we've applied through the county for grants for America 250. We were fortunate enough, the supervisors last year expanded our membership. We now have a associate membership. And then, of course, I'm going to report on both big and small, our neighborhood walks, and then the America 250 coming up. So let me go through these: the plan, the walks, our membership, training, and then sad part of 2023 is buildings we lost. So the strategic plan, this is really an important step. Supervisor Wysocki was key a while back telling me to get on this, get that plan ready. Priority number 1 is really quite important. It's the public administration. Planning, historic preservation is a planning function. It is part of the way we, just like zoning, just like land development, plan for the future so that decades from now, we have the township we wish. So with that, the historic commissions and review boards and other townships behave very much like planning commission, supervisors, formal agendas, processes, transparency. So that's what we want, and of course working closely with the township staff in order to get there. The second recommendation was to review our authorization. There are 2 laws in the state that give us that authority. One is the Municipal Planning Code, which covers all of our zoning and land development, but there's also a Historic District Act, which some towns implement. We don't have that in our town, but these are the 2, and the intent is to look at both. Best practices, this is part of our public outreach, is to give residents more visibility into the terrific historic resources we have. The last 2 years, we've had high school seniors from Conestoga who continue to open our eyes for things that they see every day and go, wow, I didn't know that was actually, a historic building. I pass it all the time when I visit my friends. So this is bringing some of the guidelines to a much more public, presentable way. Voluntary preservation, it is hard to find financial incentives at the municipal level in the state of Pennsylvania. But that's why we're going to bring on a consultant who knows these 21st century practices and bring that information in. I'll talk about the consultant in a minute, and then our outreach. So we had fun this past year trying to drive towards one goal. We learned through conversations with residents that many Tredyffrin residents don't know the historic buildings right in their backyards. So we started a program of neighborhood walks. We started with the General's Walks, which is 4 buildings on Walker Road, east of the elementary school. And it was a 2-mile walk. The Tredyffrin East Town Historical Society and we on the commission were the docents moving from place to place. But as you can see in the picture below, we actually have owners coming out and talking about their houses. Why did you buy a historic house? What is it like to live in a historic house with 300 years of history? What does it take to keep it maintained and up to date? And why do you love your house? So we had all 4 owners, and you'll see in the future I'm going to list these TRED-HR, that's Tredyffrin Historic Resource, so that you know what these properties are. These are important because they come from our survey. These are just 4 of the 8 quarters of General Washington's generals that lie inside Tredyffrin, but outside Valley Forge Park. So these are privately owned, but occupied by, Revolutionary War generals reporting to Washington. Then next, many of you remember Tredyffrin was developed in the early 90s. What's interesting is I did not know that the original farmhouse is buried in the center of the neighborhood. The owner came to us during Community Day and told us about the house, and we went out, and it was marvelous. But this is the one house you can't see from the street. So what we did was he invited all his neighbors, 70, there's 70 houses in Tredyffrin. We invited just the neighbors to come in, and here again, the owner is talking about, the history that they've developed. And he actually had some of the archaeological findings from his property as well. So the intent is to go through neighborhoods. We've asked through the Township newsletter for more neighborhoods to walk through. We're looking forward to giving those in the coming year. As far as our membership, we're full, and thanks to the supervisors, we have 2 new members, Janice and Eric. My job is to make sure everybody's got something they're excited about to help manage and lead. So this is the set of activities that we're moving forward with. Allison Andro, listed at the bottom, she's going to move from a full member to an associate member. And that's part of the reason we have the associates, so to bring on new people so they get to know more about what the commission does. And then our veterans can, instead of just leaving and losing their expertise, there's a landing place for them. So Allison wonderfully is going to continue to serve. I don't usually trumpet my own horn, but this is one where Eric Williams in the audience with me. Since October 2022, we've been going through a deliberate training process hosted by the Chester County Planning Commission, so that we become fluent with the processes and the terms of planning. Again, this is, historic preservation is just one arm, like stormwater, like, neighborhood or industrial development. And these are the 4 courses we took. We now have this fancy title of Certified Master Planners. We're book smart. We're not smart yet. And, but interestingly, it also came with this other award, a state award, which I think will be back in front of the supervisors sometime. The state is going to come and present an award. So I'm also thankful to the supervisors for the 2 organizations that we have memberships to. One is very local, Chester County Preservation Network. This is where we get in-person training with our neighbors, with all the boroughs and townships around us. And then the National Alliance is, as it sounds, it's our peer group nationwide, and we're able to leverage their resources, reach out to people who have done things. We don't have to reinvent wheels. We can ask questions and get best practices across the country. And then lastly, we're doing historic site tours. I have a 1-hour, a 2-hour, and a 3-hour driving tour. Any of you who've gone to Gettysburg and have done the route with a tour guide, that's essentially what we're doing. We're going to all the properties, or many of the properties in the township, from the different eras in time, and now we're also going to empty lots where there used to be historic buildings, and they're not there anymore. Speaking of which, so we did lose 2 buildings in 2023, very sad. The Roberts Barn in Chesterbrook on Chase Road has been a long struggle. What changed there was ownership. It moved from the swim club to the private developer, and it wasn't long before the barn came down. Similarly, in western part of Swedesford Road, that's a horse farm. A new owner came in. That pink building you see is actually in the fine print at the bottom, was eligible for the National Register, but in both cases, these buildings came down. There is no review process for these buildings. I get notification after the demolition permits are issued, and so that's one of the things that would be nice to clean up in our processes. And in the bottom, it's a building that's not lost yet, but I'm working closely with Mr. Burgo on a property on Yellow Springs. This poor owner got caught literally in 3 waves of storms, including Hurricane Ida. The image on the right is the part of the mountain in back of his house came down into the property. This is what FEMA calls an acquire and demolish practice the owner requested. What happens when FEMA money is being spent, FEMA, any federal agency, is required to see if there's any impact on historic properties of significance. FEMA did their own research and determined that this building was eligible for the National Register on 3 counts, including 2 of the people who owned the house. One was a suffragette from the 1920s, and the other was the president of Hires Root Beer Company in the 1930s. So this building still stands, but I continue to work with Steve, and it is an agenda item on tonight later regarding the disposition of the work with FEMA. So what are we doing going forward? First, a reminder, we didn't say this. So we're going to talk about our next round of consulting project, the histories of, and this is a very important new initiative by the Commission, Town Walks and then America 250. Just as a reminder, we have 19 square miles with historic properties, those 360 from the 2003 survey, scattered all across the township. These look pretty tiny, the orange, blue, and red, but what happened was, of course, 300 years ago, these were 100, 150 acre farms, all subdivided, and yet the building is still standing in the middle of a contemporary set of buildings. So what do we do about that? This is not uniquely Tredyffrin's problem. Anywhere in the Great Valley we have this problem. And so this is a unique aspect of planning to sustain our heritage that we have to address. So with regard to the overlay district, as it's called, it was adopted in 2011. At the time, the state made us change from those 2 laws. We originally authorized under the Historic District Act. That got changed. We're now under zoning. And PHMC, that's the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission, has cited that there are a number of deficiencies in our current code listed here. These are the ones that we need to address. These are preventing us from being an effective partner in planning, and we need to redress these. Eric and I are also working on gathering the best ordinance practices from across the county. There are about a dozen townships who have really fine ordinances. At this point, we're just gathering information, trying to see what they do and how well it's working. We have relationships with most of these leaders and can talk to them about the nuts and bolts of these. We've applied for a grant. I called the state this morning. They haven't officially been able to release the information about whether Tredyffrin is going to get that grant or not, but I remain confident that we will receive our $20,000 for this work. What that will do is allow us to hire a consultant with ordinance expertise, specifically in preservation, to help guide us through a process of both analyzing the ordinance, but also having the public forums where we can talk about the different options, what it means for homeowners. So that will be all part of our future process. One of the things we learned, again, with talking with residents is many don't know kind of the context of their buildings. Again, because their property has been cut off from, basically the other properties of the same time, we're missing context in a lot of places. So part of our role, this is a new initiative, but it's not new in the country. There are a number of cities that have implemented this and now more townships. And what it is basically creating narratives of what are the Tredyffrin eras of history. It isn't hard to imagine we were a colonial agricultural power. Most know that we had both the British and the colonial forces marching through in the Philadelphia. But, when you think about the Lancaster Pike, Old Lancaster Road as it's called, those were the westward avenues, and there's still buildings from those eras, inns and the like. The gentleman's estate, not my phrase, I pulled that out of an old planning document, but these are, the larger properties, but also the people who helped work and serve for the people who lived in those properties. So these both need to be looked at. And then, more contemporary commerce and industry. I think of the railroads in these days, and then finally, a lot of towns are beginning to look at the post-war suburbs. I list the building in the center. It is newly on sale on Deepdale in Stratford. And the reason this is important is it's my view or my observation that many times it's the new owners who come in who don't know what their house is about or the history. They know, what the real estate, brochure said. And then, but without context, they may not know how fully rich, their property is in the building. I'm one of those. I have a property that's historic because of the noted architect who designed, built, and lived in my house. But I had to do a lot of work to figure out why my house was important. And another forum, I'll tell you why. We do have 2 more walks coming up. Another neighborhood walk is we've invited the neighbors sort of between Contention Lane and Devon State Road from Upper Gulf down to the bottom of the hill to come to Mount Zion Church on the 28th. Any and all of you are welcome to join us. We'd love to see you there. This is we have 6 historic markers from the state in our township, and this is one of them. You may have most recently heard about it from the Berwyn school fight. The school district made a major initiative around that, I guess it was a year ago, and now it's part of the curriculum in the elementary, middle, and senior high school. But we're going to have a walk, and what's really going to be fun is if you look at the church in the back, you can see those conical windows. The township wrote a letter of support to the church, and they got a Pennsylvania Keystone construction grant a year ago, $35,000, which defrayed a big chunk of the cost of the $75,000 to refurbish those windows. They're all back in, and we will be able to walk in and see them during this tour. Then we've stepped up again to work with the county. Many of you know that the county has walks every summer on Thursday evenings. 2 years ago, we did the walk between Dupertai House and Lafayette being in Valley Forge Park. This time, we're not going to walk so long and so far. We're going to be in the churchyard and in the church of Baptist Church in the Great Valley. This is a 1710 building, and most notably, some of the most notable Tredyffrin leaders are buried in the cemetery and will be sharing, the stories of their lives and their contributions. And then finally, we all know Valley Forge. We know the Americans were up in the park. I've now told you that they've also been spilling out into our neighborhoods. But lesser known is the fact that 12,000 British were sprinkled across our township over 3 nights. So if you think about it, in September, 12,000 British troops. 4 months later, 10,000 colonial troops. I looked it up, 10 years later, the census, 10 years after this, there were only 179 households in Tredyffrin. And you think about the impact of these many forces, with their wagons, with their horses, all the things they, gathered and possessed from the people. And I did a quick count, 48 of the 97 landowners in Tredyffrin at the time requested reparations for things stolen. Sheep, cows, oats, nails, milk, all sorts of things. But this is, where Tredyffrin is this, if I get it right, this area on the right. Those are the forces. This is Tredyffrin, and these are the 2 marches on Sweetsherd Road and a Lancaster that they went into Malvern and attacked General Wayne up on the hill. So it is from Tredyffrin. It's actually from Howellville, this intersection right up here outside, that the British forces launched that attack in midnight of September 20, 1777. So we'll be marking that. This is going to be a busy time. The Army, Navy, both services turned 250. That means people are going to be coming to Philadelphia, founded in Philadelphia, both services. The World Cup has 6 games in Philadelphia. Major League Baseball's got their All-Star. Valley Forge Park, I am the liaison to Valley Forge Park for Chester County. We're working closely with them. They're going to be celebrating their 50th anniversary as a national park. If those remember the bicentennial, President Johnson came in on 4th of July and dedicated the park. It was a state park before, now a federal park. They're going to have that celebration. The superintendent is asking that organizations, including our township, have places of declaration. What that means is reading the full Declaration of Independence and then following it with something. Could be a party, could be a book discussion. Things we're thinking about is collaborating with the township parks to maybe have, like a concert afterwards in Wilson Farm Park after reading. These are the things that are in planning right now. Chester County, we're working with them. I'll show you the Heritage Center. And then finally, Beth Specker organized just last week the first meeting, collaboration within Tredyffrin Township of what are we going to do going forward. We had the library, the Tredyffrin Easttown Historical Society, the Historic Preservation Trust, Dupertai House, the Historic Commission. We will be adding the school district. What are we all going to do in 2025 to 2028 to commemorate these days? It's the beginning. Those of you who were here in 2007, remember we had a 300th anniversary for the township. It's those kind of events that we're hoping to recreate during these years ahead. So it's coordinate, communicate, collaborate is the aim of that. And then finally, I've been working diligently to see if we can't get a heritage center here in Tredyffrin. This is part of a Chester County-wide plan to have heritage centers, gateways, and interpretive sites. It's a commission that's been working for 2 years. The little box up on the right, we're that top right red square. The one on the bottom left, that's Paoli. For the Paoli Massacre, they'll have a historic center too. And the one that we can see, if you go and you want to have a nice dinner or lunch, Marshallton is the place to go. They have a beautiful, relatively new heritage center between their inn and their historic restaurant. That's the kind of building that we hope to see in the township. We've applied for 2 grants with the county, and hopefully we'll see that in our future. This all comes also down to tourism. As I mentioned, all these events coming up in these years, we can expect more and more visitors not only from the east, but from across the country visiting, and hopefully we'll have some plans for them. And with that, thank you.
Well, thank you, Rob. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah. How do we find out about which houses are...
So wait, you have to go to the microphone and tell us who you are.
I'm sorry?
Just go up to the microphone so we can hear you.
How do we find out how the houses are determined if they're on the list and which houses are on the list?
Prosecutor, you have to tell us your name first. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Kathy Nassau. I'd like to know how it's determined if a house is on the list, it's historically certified,
Right.
and how they came up with those predictions of what they would want.
What was the second half of the
You know,
question?
what it is that determines it, and which houses are on it.
Sure, thank you. So the process which all other municipalities have been using is one of what's called designation. We have an inventory of buildings that are historic.
That's what I want to know, is what's considered part of that inventory. I want to know what the
Right.
list is, and then I want to know what determines it ends up on that list.
So there's two different lists, and I'm going to try to be clear. One is purely an inventory, which is not subject to any of the regulations per se. It's merely the list that we will be working with. The second step...
For what purpose? When you say it doesn't...
Well, is just to know where our historic buildings are. I mean, we have the information, parcel maps. The Historical Society has been documenting these buildings for decades. So these buildings are known. The list of the 360 is actually on the Historic Commission's website. It's not in a very user-friendly way, but it is there.
Is there a way to get that printed out for people that aren't computer savvy?
You could write through the township, and I can probably figure out a way to get that to you.
Great, thank you.
And then, yeah, it would probably be an attachment that you could print at home.
Okay.
Would you mind if I asked you where in the township you live?
I live on Sweetsford Road, and I believe I was on the list in 2017.
Right.
But what I understood, and that's what I'm asking you now, is what determines what goes
Right.
on that list? Because it was a lot of things, most of them were objective, but some were subjective. But
Right.
we didn't fit in any. We were much later,
Right.
and we're still on that list.
So what's your address, just so we know where you are?
I'm sorry?
What's your address?
1695, Sweetsford.
Sweetsford. Okay, thank you.
So that list is history. That was sunsetted back in 2019, the one you're
Okay.
referring to. The way this works, every community has a set of criteria, which I think you did see. There was a set of criteria in that list. We're going to revisit that set of criteria for what could be deemed significantly historic in the township.
And so what is that criteria? 'Cause
We don't
wasn't
have
it-
that yet.
You haven't determined it yet?
We haven't even started on that,
So
which is...
you don't have the list either, if you don't
We
have
don't
the
have the
criteria.
list.
Okay. So
The-
that old list has been thrown out?
Correct. But I will tell you, because we don't have a list, there is not a single property in the township of Tredyffrin that is protected in any way. So Easttown,
what? I can't-
there is no building in the township of Tredyffrin that is protected as a historic resource in any manner. By contrast, Easttown Township has 300 buildings that are part of their historic preservation code. East Whiteland to our west has about 250.
I'm not worried about what these other townships are
Understood.
doing. I'm only paying taxes here.
Right, understood.
But I think just to interrupt for a second, because this is, like, you two probably should talk offline.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think.
sorry.
Okay.
But just to be clear, he's just starting the process. Like, you're asking a lot of questions that are,
Part of it was the last time that I was aware of this was
We're
going
starting-
on.
we're-
It was
he's starting-
2017.
but Rob, you're starting like with a blank piece of paper, right? Or basically.
Yeah, so
So, yeah.
basically, when we get the grant, we're going to start the process. We need an expert. That will be the preservation consultant. They'll be working with the Historic Commission. We'll be discussing this all at our meetings. It is intended to be an open, transparent process, and the effect is it's supposed to be a community-wide decision about how we move forward with preservation if we want to preserve our structures. I've shown at least 2 buildings there that no longer exist.
They're a lot older than what I live in. I mean,
Okay.
I
So-
wasn't
so
even,
guys,
I wasn't
I'm-
even near the
All right,
dates
well,
So guys,
before.
wait,
You'll be
stop.
seeing that soon.
Can you stop?
Sorry.
We just, I think
Okay.
you guys should take this offline, I think,
Okay,
to
thank you.
talk about it. It's important topic for sure, but I think there's a lot you guys probably should just talk on individually, if that's okay. Is that okay, Rob? Yeah?
Perfect.
And if you guys, after the meeting, could get your contact together?
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks.
sitting right there.
I was simply going to say that I want to thank Rob and the commission for their incredible amount of work. They spend a lot of hours developing programming, educational materials, events like tonight, and I think we're very fortunate as a township to have these folks that are so amped up on history and its significance and its impact in our community. And I really want to thank those volunteers for their work here in Tredyffrin. Thank you.
I have several of
And
my
I would
commission
also
members
add,
here
just
tonight.
to add that thank you Supervisor Holt, by the way. I would add that anyone who hasn't gone on one of the historic walks that they've had is missing out on a really great opportunity to understand better the history that's inside of our community. I think those are super well done, and again, to emphasize, these are all done by volunteers. It's really nice.
Thank you.
So thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned that Easttown has historic preservation laws on the books. When did they pass theirs? Like, how long have they had these laws in place?
I don't know the date. I know they've updated theirs in the last 5 years to include adding additional buildings to their list of protected properties.
Okay, thank you.
Any other supervisor comment?
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Good evening, everybody. Mike Heberg, I live in Berwyn. A couple questions or thoughts. First of all, I'd like to commend Rob and the Historical Commission for all the work that they've done over the last couple of years. They spent a lot of time and effort, educating the community and enhancing the enjoyment of the historical assets of this community, and I certainly support that very much. I think, Rob, you misspoke when you said the survey was done in 2023, the survey. As you
I'm
know,
sorry.
the survey was done
I said that once, yeah,
Okay.
2003.
So the survey was done in 2003. That's when they basically did an inventory of all the assets, the historic assets in the township, but along with that inventory, they did a classification, right? So they classified these various assets into Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and that distinction is important as we move towards the implementation of an ordinance. Do you know how many Class 1 assets there are in the township? Is it like somewhere in the low 30s?
It's a bigger number than that. It's about 50,
Okay.
according to the county atlas.
But how about according to our survey? It's around 30, right?
There were 30 properties at the time from before the change, when we still had a Historic Architectural Review Board. There were 30 properties that we demmed. I call them the gems. But they also have some other buildings that are still Class 1 other than those.
Right. Okay. So there's the Class 2 resources on top of that, right?
Yes.
So, you have several hundred properties. And the idea that the township does not have a historic preservation ordinance, I don't think is accurate. It's under 208-122.2 in the zoning code. There is a historic protection ordinance in the township zoning code today, right?
So there is an overlay district. It is spelled out what the protections are. But as I noted there are deficiencies in that code that have been noted by at least PHMC that need to be redressed.
Well, that's a good distinction. That's in the opinion of PHMC, right? Because the ordinance is voluntary at this time, right? So property owners have the right to participate in protecting their own property. That's what's in the code, is you can opt in. And in fact, priority 4 on one of the lists, the matters that you showed on your slide presentation was to encourage voluntary preservation with incentives, and there were a couple other things, I think, benefits for people who would voluntarily put their properties under protection. So that's been the rub over the years, right? There are some communities who say, we're going to make you, you own this property, you paid hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for this property, and we are going to control what you can do on this property. And there are other communities who've made the decision to say, if you want to protect your property, we're going to offer you the opportunity to do that. We're going to offer you incentives. We're going to communicate with you and reach out to you and try to come to some meeting of the minds, and you will protect your property. But we're not going to make you do anything. You hear, there's the term that you hear in some.
So Mike, just a second, he hasn't made any proposal or anything. So I'm not sure.
I understand that. I understand that. But this is the first time that I know of in recent years there's been any public presentation about what the plan is and what the sequence is. Okay, so I'm just giving folks some background on where we are now, right? So the other thing I think so the idea was to encourage voluntary preservation is one of the things that you cited. One of the other things that you cited was to maintain the property rights of township residents. Okay, that's another one of the priorities, one of the purposes, right? So I don't think, has the Historic Commission communicated directly with, say, Class 1 property owners and said, this is what we intend to do, this is what we'd like to do, what do you think about it? What would incentivize you to voluntarily protect your property, first of all? And second of all, if we're going to create incentives, what kind of incentives would make this palatable to you? So that would be something that I would suggest some direct outreach to property owners and take the temperature, find out how you could get them to come on board, right?
Sure.
And I'm not aware that that's ever really happened. I know it didn't happen for a bunch of years, and I know that you seem to be very committed to making this work, and so that would be something that I would suggest that you consider. The other thing that as I look at the sequence of events, it seems to me that what you should do, you've got a historic survey that's 21 years old now, right? And to your point, there's some difference of opinion as to what's a Class 1 and what's a Class 2 here relative to what, for example, the county says, right? So it seems to me that it would make sense to do the survey first so that not only you have accurate information on each of these properties, you've made a classification that is transparent to those property owners. So the property owners know I'm in a Class 1 property or I'm in a Class 2 property. And then as you endeavor to implement an ordinance, you can make clear to them, you're a Class 1 property and these provisions are going to apply to you. You're a Class 2 property and these other provisions are going to apply to you. But I have a concern that given that the classification system has some wiggle room in it, that there could be an ordinance that is implemented, and then all of a sudden somebody's in a Class 2 property is in a Class 1 property, and the provisions under which they have to live their life change. And so I think the sequencing that you have set up, and in fact on your PowerPoint slide, you even have the survey first followed by the ordinance. I don't know if that was intended to demonstrate what the sequence is, but it just seems to me that, doing the sequence first, making it as transparent and communicative as possible with the property owner so they know this is where I stand and then stick to that. So, don't allow someone's classification to be changed after the ordinance has already been put in.
Right.
What's your thought relative to doing it
Well,
that way?
I think I want to take all of your good ideas and bring them into the process. Your comments are, largely, need to be examined. I will respond in two ways, though. The class system, most townships are moving away from the class township. That's a nationwide. So I'll get into, later at another time what that is. And then the second is, this is a code in our zoning code. And there's no other place in the zoning code that I'm aware of where you can opt in or opt out. Either, you have impervious surface, you have a 4-foot fence, you have a setback. I don't get to choose whether I'm in or out, an overlay. I certainly don't get to say whether I'm in or out of a stormwater overlay. So the intent is for this to be uniform, transparent, visible to everybody so they understand. And the biggest thing is this is a movement forward by the community to try to, regain that, in my opinion, regain that balance between preserving our heritage and protecting rights.
But I don't really see where there's any, I don't really see where the reasons are that protects people's rights. And I'm puzzled by the fact that people who own historic properties have not already voluntarily opted in.
Right.
Why hasn't that happened? Clearly, the idea is you have to make people do this.
Well,
you can't let them choose. You have to make them do this in order to do that. And to have the local government say to you, look, this is what you're going to do with your property. You've been living there for a long time. It's, but we're going to tell you what you can do from now on as it applies to your status as and we're also going to decide whether you're in or out of the classification.
Mike, he doesn't have a proposal yet. He's just going to look at this.
Yeah.
And there's going to be lots of conversation. You've provided a lot of really important facts. So just finish. I let you talk. You let me talk now. I think you provide a lot of really good input that we need to take on board because we would like to not make mistakes that have been made in the past and like to see if we can produce something that is acceptable to the whole community. But there's no proposal to respond to yet. I mean, it feels like you've got this hypothetical, fairly tough historic preservation ordinance that you're arguing against that doesn't exist here.
Well, if you want to volunteer, I'll volunteer to participate in the group. So.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Here we go.
Okay.
Excuse me. That's what I was going to say. I've listened to both of you, and like I said, I'm new at this party go-round, but what you're saying and what this young lady there said, maybe you all can work with him and together come up with a really good strategic type plan to where some of the things that you're talking about for the community to be involved in, they'll be able to see a easier path to be involved in, and the things that Rob is saying, all of you all can come together and put something out there that works for each side so that we can save these 360 buildings, if not more, because this is history. And I mean, I know I'm going to turn into dust one day, but for the folks that's still here, you'd like for them to know that these buildings were here when the British came through and everybody else. So maybe you all could work together and come up with a good plan and then bring it back and then go to the next step and put it out there to the community so that they'll get involved and come here and speak their mind too, so everybody's on one page or close to one page.
I accept your volunteering.
Okay. And what's ironic is I think this is what the Americans fought the British about anyway, right? Was their ability to self-determination. So that's what's ironic about this is these folks who have these historic properties.
Mike, thank you.
You're going to let me finish?
I'm going to let you finish here, but okay. Thank you. I'd like to just echo what Chairman Miller said here. Rob didn't come here with a proposal. He knows what the weaknesses are, what the weakness is in doing nothing. We can keep it the same way, and we'll have more buildings coming down. And you're right, there'll be property rights will prevail. But I bet if he works hard and he works with volunteers such as you, such as that young lady, and others and folks already on the commission, they'll come up with something that will work moving forward. And I understand what you're saying. You're voicing an opinion. I sense that what you're saying is keep it the way it is and we'll have no property covered ever. Maybe. I don't know. But I know it's not been, nothing has happened since this ordinance was passed, the overlay ordinance. So my point is, Rod didn't come here and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it this way. Everybody's going to be in it. No, he came and said, I realized the failings of the past and I realized the challenges of the future here for historic preservation. But we can't sit still and do nothing. Let's see what we can do.
Actually, if I may speak, I think we're getting into the weeds, and we're crossing bridges before we come to them, and so I think let me suggest that if you have a bunch of good ideas, please give them to Mr. Williams, and I think he will consider them. Please volunteer, and when you have proposals, bring them to the Historical Commission, bring them to the Board of Supervisors. We can act at that time. Right now, we're getting into the weeds.
But there's a basic sequencing question here, and this is a board decision. What goes first, the survey or the ordinance?
Okay.
And what I'm suggesting is the survey should go first. You should identify which properties are valuable and should be protected in some way or the other. You should identify them first, and then go to designing an ordinance. That's my point.
So I can
can
address that. As you know well, Chester County Planning Commission is a group that I have consulted with the state. In both cases, they suggest working on the ordinance first because we have a very good basic survey list now, and that to go update the survey after you have the new ordinance so you know which properties to go look at next. So the survey we have today is sufficient. We're doing more research on properties. That's part of the plan that I showed you there. And so we've already made that decision. That decision is done.
I mean, if you have a survey, right? If you have a survey that doesn't need very much work to it, then that means it ought to be able to be updated very quickly and inexpensively. But what I'm suggesting is if I'm a property owner and I've got a class 1 or a class 2 or a class 3, I want to be sure where I am before the ordinance begins to take shape. And that's what I'm suggesting.
Great suggestion, thank you. Any other public comment? Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, sir.
A motion to adopt Resolution 2024-10 for the sewer planning module for 311 South Valley Forge Road. Mrs. McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman Miller, members of the board. So we have a land development project that's currently submitted. It's under review, but it is to convert a single family to 5 townhomes. And as part of that, they obviously need to update their sewer planning. And this is in the RHM sewer shed. So they have to do a full planning module as opposed to the exemptions that we typically see. And as part of that, we do need this resolution so that it can be formally reviewed by DEP.
Thank you, Ms. McPherson. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do we hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Oh, roll call. It's a resolution. Doesn't say that on here. Oh, man. Oh, roll call. Oh, any comment, first of all, from anyone? Any public comment? All right, this is a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Gussie.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Johnson Pugh.
Aye.
And I vote aye. The motion carries. Thank you. Motion to execute a letter of agreement between Tredyffrin Township, PEMA, and the PA Historic Preservation Office for the mitigation plan associated with 1289 Yellow Springs Road. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller and members of the board, the letter agreement was discussed at the previous board meeting. It's dated February 13th, provided to the township by FEMA. This is in regards to an acquisition demolition process. There's a couple properties that are being considered by FEMA for potential acquisition and demolish because of flooding issues. This letter had 3 items that were included, as well as some timeframes that go along with that. The first was historical documentation of the property. The second was historical commission training. And the third was a requirement that the pool, there's a spring-fed pool that was, I guess, designed by Thomas Sears, would have to be maintained by the township at the end. There was a dollar amount that FEMA has provided for these items of $182,000. There have been discussions with Mr. Rob Williams have referred to this. He's had discussions on the first two items, the historical documentation and the historical committee training. And the third item, the demolition of, or not demolition of the spring-fed pond, we've had some discussion with FEMA to make sure that some of the repair work to the masonry and stone could be included by anything that would be reimbursed from FEMA for that project. FEMA has notified the township manager and I that their timeline for this is of importance because they said the funding could elapse if they don't move forward with this particular execution of this document. They still haven't obligated the funding for this particular property, and that process still has to move forward through the federal process at FEMA. If there's any questions, I can certainly answer.
Does the $182,000 cover our costs associated with the preservation?
That would be the other item with this. We would say if the board does approve this, we would say as part of that approval that we would just put in there a condition that any of those costs for the historical documentation for the historic committee training would not exceed $182,000, the money that FEMA will reimburse the township.
And how about the preservation of the pool?
The pool, we did get an estimate from a contractor that said about $28,000 for those repair work for that. FEMA has told us this week in an email that could be included as part of the contingency that we had originally estimated for the acquisition process.
Other supervisor questions?
Ellen, what I'm understanding is that they're asking us to acknowledge this letter. This is not an agreement between any of the parties. Is that a distinction without a difference, or how do you see that?
I think at this point I see it as this letter is necessary to proceed with the grant application.
Right, so yeah, it's not the final agreement, but by acknowledging this letter, we agree to the terms of the letter in terms of historic inventory, training of the Historic Commission, the pond preservation, in which we received a second email confirming that the cost of the $20,000 will be covered by contingency. But you're really just agreeing to the historic inventory, preservation of the pond, and the training of Historic Commission.
So then what will the subsequent agreement be agreed? Will it be agreed?
This is like a step in the process, and like Steve can follow up, but generally then it goes back to the federal process, which will then do, I guess, what they believe is the actual cost of the home, make an offer to the homeowner, final documents we produce for us to sign off on, as well as the homeowner, and at that point it'll be finalized.
So if Tredyffrin were to stop the process, would we say no now, or would we say no later, or do we keep exploring? Or if we want to stop our participation in this process, obviously right now would be an opportunity to do it, right?
Yeah, yes. I mean, ideally, so yeah, if you don't agree with the letter, then the funds that are on hold will be no longer on hold. They will just re-release the funds. But you move forward, you're agreeing to the next steps in the process of the purchase program.
I'm really torn on this one because I support the educational benefits that will go along with the grant and the opportunities that the commission have and related to this property. I think there's a great learning opportunity for everyone involved. But something about this on the other side makes me wonder why we're spending a lot of money on a property that I still think has a lot of value. And that really hasn't been explored. But it's also part of something that the federal government is going to make a decision on what they believe that the value of this property is. And that's to be determined. So I think this is a difficult decision.
I don't disagree. I mean, the house is built on a stream, unfortunately, and we've seen the tremendous amount of flooding that has gone, flowed right through the thing, up to the countertops. I mean, it's a mess. I don't disagree that it's kind of a difficult situation. I personally am supporting this.
Yeah, just to make sure everyone's clear, so if we acknowledge this letter and move forward this phase and do the motion as Mr. Virgo and I have proposed, there should be no cost to the township for this part. We're saying we're going to stay within the grant confines of the budget of $182,000 for the restoration work, the study, and the training. Again, it all will depend as the next stages move on, but in that term, we should have no additional township expenditures related to this.
We do end
Now,
up,
we'll be reimbursed, so we'll have to spend it up front, but again, if we move forward with the project, we will be reimbursed.
yeah, but we do end up with a 6-acre park that has a pool on it that we have to maintain and keep safe and all of that. So there is a ongoing.
Yes, so
It's
the
a
property
also
will,
a benefit to the township.
at the end of all this process, we will have a township asset, but we cannot, it'll be very limited what you can do there. It's only for preserving the watershed and the open space. You could probably plant some trees and that sort of thing. but it can't be
So Bill,
developed.
if this property didn't have any of these historical sort of components, we would be going through the regular FEMA, we would go right to the demolition, we would move forward, we'd have maybe some minor costs, not, am I right?
Yeah, you'd have to do an appraisal. It's very similar to what we do with other homes.
It would be exactly what we're doing for some other homes that are right in the floodplain. So this is difficult for me going forward because I think of the pool there. That sort of bothers me, okay? But I also think this is the program we are. And I understand the cost aspect, but we are incurring, all things being equal and everything goes well, we don't have any cost for this part of it. So this part of it is with the historical, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but this is in a floodplain, and we stumbled upon the historical nature. Now, because of FEMA and PEMA, we have to do the historical study. But that's being paid for. But in order to move forward, the house is going to be taken down. So, if we just pull the plug, at this point, I'm just wondering, what happens? What happens to, not only with this one, but what happens in other relationship? I know we have a large investment with FEMA and PEMA now at another location where it's not historical. We're not going to spend a lot of money. We're going to take houses down and do things so our first responders don't risk their lives when we have a heavy rainstorm, and we just deal with this again. So that's where I am torn, and I understand it. But I'm torn for another reason. I'm torn for the pool situation. But to me, at the end, that's probably de minimis. So, I support this, and I absolutely respect Supervisor Holt's view here, absolutely. But I'm just looking at no cost for us now. That doesn't make, and the house comes down, and we have, unfortunately, the park, as it was referred to, and it's not a park, you can't use it, and you have a pool that's going to be fenced. But I'm done.
Any other supervisor comment? Any public comment?
Yes. In response to the comments or the questions about the pool being created, it's spring-fed, correct? So it's happening naturally. And the township already has, in my mind, a pool that we're taking care of, and that's the pond at Wilson Farm Park, which is big. I don't know how deep it is, but I've always thought it's a drowning hazard for little kids or possibly other animals, and so I think this pool on this property is much more shallow. So it's my thought that hopefully it won't be as big a deal as everybody thinks, because we're already dealing with a pond that's been there for 20 years.
That's a good point. We have ponds in other parks also.
Right. Thank you.
With my hat as the Historic Commission Chair, at the request of Mr. Martin, Mr. Burgo, they wanted to understand the risk, the cost risk. I reached out to 3 preservation consultants about the work package for the recordation and the training. The 2 of them refused to provide a cost because they don't fully understand the full range, but the one consultant who I trust basically said the recordation would be approximately $25,000. The training would be approximately $5,000. And that's, in my opinion, probably what our township risk is for those 2 actions.
So well inside the $182,000 that we have available then.
Seems to be.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, that's helpful. Any other supervisor comment? No? All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Ray Clark from Overlook Place in Malvern. I don't know really anything about the historic part of the pool or so much about this property, but I do know that downstream of this is a tributary that ends up in Valley Creek. And there is massive erosion along the banks of that, all sorts of sediment going into our exceptional value Valley Creek. So if we had an asset that we could improve the stormwater management, that would be a good thing, I think, for the township. I don't know if it's even possible to do that, but there would be benefits there. And I would say that it's really because of the development up on the mountain that we're now, faced with the problem that we are, and that the stormwater run, that plus climate change has created this problem. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Ray. Any other public comment? Any other supervisor comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, there's no motion? I thought we had a motion already. Oh, all right, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Now all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Motion to adopt Resolution 2024-15, authorizing traffic planning and design to apply for a highway occupancy permit on behalf of the township. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, public. This item is a reference to a highway occupancy permit for the Tredyffrin School District. School field project. It actually relates very closely to item P on the agenda, further on the agenda tonight. As part of their application, in order for them to get this project moving, as we shared, I got it sent to the board. This is a retroactive approval. The township had to sign off and let them apply to start the process. As you know, with PennDOT, it takes a rather lengthy time to get going. This allowed them to get that portion of the application and basically approving that they're going to start the work. All the items have been reviewed and approved by staff. So tonight I'm asking for your authorization to officially sign off on the application permit for the school district.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any supervisor comment? Well, let's have a motion first. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, now any supervisor comment? Any public comment? There's a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Gussie.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
Supervisor Johnson Pugh.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Motion to adopt Resolution 2024-16, supporting the Pennsylvania Commission for the United States Semi-Quincentennial, and that's the 250th. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that you had to say that, not me tonight. So that was not an easy one to get out. So tonight is this, as Mr. Benning from our Historic Commission mentioned earlier, the Pennsylvania 250, America 250 is taking place. Chester County and Pennsylvania will be working diligently to participate in all the events that will be taking place. This is just a formal resolution saying we support this effort in supporting the 4 pillars, which are we hope to educate, preserve, innovate, and celebrate. Very straightforward, and happy to answer any additional questions.
Do we hear a motion?
Motion.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment? Any public comment?
I want to help everybody going forward. This big word, the best way to remember it is half of 500. So it's half of 500. So when you think of 500, 500 and semi, then it doesn't come off the tongue quite as, if you can think about it and break it up that way, it's easier.
Yeah, it's not as easy as bicentennial.
Thank you for that insight. Any other public comment? All right, there's a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble?
Aye.
Supervisor Holt?
Aye.
Supervisor Gussie?
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki?
Aye.
Supervisor Johnson Pugh?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion carries. Motion to adopt Resolution 2024-17, to authorize the disposition of public records as set forth in the Municipal Records Manual and in accordance with Act 428 of 1969. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As required by state law, when we go to dispose of old records, we create a list, board approves it, and then we schedule a time to have them shredded. So that's what we're here for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Duraco. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment? Any public comment? This is a roll call vote. Supervisor Humble.
Aye.
Supervisor Holt.
Aye.
Supervisor Gussie.
Aye.
Supervisor Wysocki.
Aye.
And Supervisor Johnson Pugh.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Motion. Motion to authorize awarding the contract for Church Road and Continental Boulevard resurfacing project contract to Glasgow, Inc., the lowest qualified bidder. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Staff is seeking authorization from the board to approve the bid results for the Church Road and Continental Boulevard resurfacing program. On April 5th, we received the bids online through PennBid. This was a budgeted item in the 24 budget. Funding for Church Road is financed through the sewer fund with partial reimbursement from the developer associated with the Church Road pump station, and Continental Boulevard is financed through the general fund reserve with relief from the adjacent property owner. Sealed bids were open. Tabulations are below. We had 5 bidders. Lowest bid was $140,760, and the highest bid was $198,953.50. Staff reviewed the results, and we are recommending Glasgow, who was the lowest bidder, for a total of $140,760. Happy to answer any questions.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment or questions?
Mr. Fitzgerald, we've used Glasgow in the past, that I know, and I just want that confirmed.
Yes, we are very pleased with Glasgow and working with them. It's never been a problem, so yes.
Thanks.
Any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize awarding the contract for the 2024 Super Pave project contract to Glasgow, Inc., the lowest qualified bidder. Again, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Staff is seeking authorization from the board to approve the bid results of the 2024 Super Pave program. Bids were opened on April 5th at the Township building through the PennBid program. This was budgeted in the 2024 year. Funding is provided by the PennDOT Liquid Fuels program. Sealed bids were opened and tabulation scored, as you can see below. We had 5 bidders. The lowest bid was $1,004,840.10, and the highest bidder was $1,199,161.50. Staff reviewed the bids, and we are recommending Glasgow, which was the lowest bid, for $1,004,840.10. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment or questions? Public questions or comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve the serving of alcohol at 2 specific events in 2024 at Tredyffrin Library. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. On behalf of our library director, Mallory Hoffman, we're seeking authorization to have alcohol at 2 events. The first being the library's donor reception on May 31st. It's an event that we hold every year for donors who exceed $250 in donations, as well as the November 1st event, which is an adults-only mini golf event in the library. So we're hoping to host about 100 people for that. So that's what we're here for authorization for tonight. Happy to answer questions.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes. Do we worry about spillage inside the library? I mean, that's just something I worry about, because it's going to be a lot of people, and some of those spaces are narrow, and, just wondering what the plan is for that.
So the event in May, I believe, is generally located outside on the, like the patio. And then the mini golf event, the carpet's pretty beat up. No, in all seriousness, I think the idea is you just have maybe 1 or 2 not I don't think it's a rowdy event by any means, so hopefully they'll, if there are any messes.
I've already paid my sponsorship for the mini golf event, but I do worry about spilling on our library assets. Thank you.
Any other board comments?
Sharon, I would have to say, since I am on the Library Foundation and I'm one of the people who will be working for this, we can try to have it set up that the glasses, you won't get as much in there, and we can put certain places, where we can ask people if they're going to be drinking to be, so that they won't be in the area where they may spill something on books, or we can always do that. That can work, and I think we'll be able to do that. And we see about having particular type glasses. You may have a glass this size, but we'll only fill it to here, and we can go from there. But I'm going to protect the books, don't worry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say I've been at many events at the library and that have served alcohol, and I've never seen any kind of spillage or problems. It's a pretty staid, this isn't a frat party. I mean, it's a pretty staid kind of a thing, just to be clear. Any other comments? Any public comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to ratify and approve a letter of support for a grant application by the Mount Zion AME Church. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you tonight is a letter of support for a grant application that the church has put forward for Senator Fetterman's fiscal year 2025 appropriation request. They're seeking a grant in the amount of $500,000 to renovate the church, to reopen it for community use, educational tours with historic artifacts, and small intimate services. This is just a letter of support. We've already, because of the timing, I had to get this in. Unfortunately, it's another one of these that I signed on behalf of the township. I'm asking for your authorization to officially do that.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment? I'll just say this is something we definitely should approve. This is something we definitely should support as a community. Any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize staff to submit an application for the state and local cybersecurity grant program. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tonight we're seeking authorization for our IT director to apply for a grant that's being pushed out by the federal government. It'll help bolster our cybersecurity prevention, and so we think this is a great program, and again, any chance to increase security and offset costs we'll take advantage of.
Thank you, Mr. Duraco. Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment or questions? Public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve master services agreement with Bowman as a traffic consultant. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller and members of the board, the following agreement for the master services between the Tredyffrin Township and Bowman is for traffic services. These are for small projects that the township may ask our traffic consultant to engage in. And Bowman recently, I guess, merged with McMahon Associates, who we've used for a long time, so the name changed, and according to their internal procedures and talking to them, they needed to have another document. It still will use the approved 2024 fees and subsequent in the years that follow. Larger projects, anything else we do, like larger capital projects like our Valley Forge Road Signals project, those will be done through the proposal process.
Thank you, Mr. Burgo. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments from the board? Public questions or comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize the engineering department to advertise and receive bids for the Bear Road Stormwater Infiltration and Improvement Project. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller, member of the board, this is one of our 2024 capital projects, the Bear Road Stormwater Infiltration Improvement Project. This is included in our 2024 capital budget and our 5-year plan. Funding will utilize grants from the state of Pennsylvania, from PADEP, as well as Chester County, as well as township funding. This project has been in the works for a number of years and has been in past capital budget discussions and grants as we have applied for them over the last couple of years. The project is focused on a area that has an outfall to Contention Lane and has contributed to, that outfall has contributed to flooding to residents along Contention Lane, and we are looking to capture and collect stormwater runoff from the roadway segments underground, infiltrate them, and reduce the flows going down to Trout Creek. It was identified in the 2019 stormwater, stormwater task force as one of the key projects. We've had several meetings with residents over the course of this year, going back to January and February, and included in there was a little summation. We have about 41%, $575,880 as the grant funds, and about $824,000, about 58% that is here for township funding. So we're asking to, we basically have finished up the design end of things. We're just cleaning up the plans, getting them ready for bidding, and working with the utility providers on some of the gas line relocation. So we'll be ready to advertise the project and put it out on pen bid in early May.
Thank you, Mr. Burgo. Do I hear a motion to approve this?
So, second.
Comments on the board? Public comments?
Hey, Christian Shea from Berwyn. Actually live on Bear Road. Really great to hear that stormwater is such a focus. I mean, we all see the flooding. Great to see this check, especially on tax day. However, definitely concerns, especially on some of the details of the project. We do not want water going down to Trout Road or Trout Creek. Spoonwood is also a concern as well too, and contention. Specifically, a concern is the water runoff and construction at 648 and 660 Bear Road. Right after that, they want to put in the infiltration system, and there's a storm drain at 632, 640 Bear Road. That storm drain feeds above ground for about 50 yards before it goes off to the runoff to Trout Creek. We've got pictures when it rains, none of that water hits down to the Trout Creek. We've highlighted specifically where there's a flooding issue. There's a 2-foot water runoff drain from Margot Road that runs directly in and pushes directly into Spoonwood that then hits Contention that then runs into Trout Creek. So my ask is, I've raised this before. I mean, there have been meetings. It was, to be honest, a fairly one-sided discussion. We've raised these issues with Margot Road. You know, the goal is to reduce the flooding, and we didn't get the feedback that we wanted. I got some photos, happy to share and spread across, just to show the erosion that's created from Margot Road. That runoff is about 5.5 feet deep that the flooding creates from that 2-foot pipe. You can see, happy to share, I'm not sure if I'm able to pass them around, but the flooding from the storm drain runoff from 632, 640 Bear Road is nothing. So we got 5 feet erosion versus virtually nothing. We've raised this, we've asked the township to come out and just take a look at this. This is a pretty large construction. There's been no one on the ground from the township or for Jacobs that has actually taken a look at it to agree or dispute our request.
Thank you. So Steve, have you been out there? Or?
We've been out to several of the areas looking at outfalls, but we have not been out to, we've had discussions with Mr. Shea and Mr. Yance, who've raised this issue of the concern coming from the outfalls on Margot Lane. And we've offered, I mean, Mr. Martin and I have offered we would certainly go out and meet with you and take a look at the outfall. And we've also indicated that the large portion of this project is kind of more focused towards the western area. This was a subset added to the project later from the original grant because of the other pipe's a 30 or 36 inch pipe that drains into the woods above those Contention Lane areas. So that's where the lion's share of those underground stormwater systems are being designed and implemented. And then we try to do a additional control level for some of those upper ones because there are many outfalls going into the woods up there from Margot Lane as well as Bear Road, as well as upstream, as I think you've seen from some of our visits in the field. There's some serious erosion in some of those upper areas coming from Easttown Township into the township, as well as the upper areas of Berwyn Baptist. So we would certainly meet with you and take a look at the outfall, and like we said, we know there's a lot of concerns with a lot of the stormwater outfalls here in the township, so we're not saying that that's not a concern. It's just this project has been going on for several years, and we can certainly look at that, but we do have this design that was funded from a grant to move forward.
So, like, the concern is, and if you guys you want to look at the pictures, we can share them. There is substantial, and like the feedback we've gotten is that's not the focus of the project on Margot Lane. It's substantial erosion and flooding coming from that, and we can literally show you there is absolutely no erosion or runoff coming from the storm drain on 602, 640. So, like, I don't understand, like, I understand, it's great to see this check, and trust me, like, it is crazy how much it floods around here, even like on a small rain. But what's probably gonna upset friends of mine that are on Contention Lane and Spoonwood is to see all this money being spent and it's not remediating the problem or the issue here. And not, like, especially not even coming out to look at it, and we're gonna go to bid here without identifying what the root cause is here, and that's a concern.
Just to clarify, the systems that we talked about, that area is not the focus of the project. The main portion of our project is more focused on that 590 Contention Lane, right around that curve. That's where that main outfall that collects the drainage today is actually focusing the water into the hillside. And if you have not seen that outfall, there is a massive amount of erosion that goes all the way down the steep slopes, all the way down behind those homes, all the way down into Trout Creek directly. And there's been an enormous amount of washout and sediment that's been going on for the last handful of years. But there's a 30-inch pipe, and pieces of that pipe have washed apart and are separated. It's actually washing away part of our sanitary sewer manhole that's in the woods, and it's created a huge cavern that we basically have tree roots exposed and trees that are falling over on the hillsides back there.
So I don't doubt that, but the problem we have here is you all haven't looked at the erosion and the outfall from Margot Lane. So we're making a decision here to go after that without doing a few.
This is not the only project. We have a stormwater task force has looked at issues throughout the township. I assure you there are massive stormwater issues throughout the township. The Margot Lane one would be a future project.
So then my question is, why are we spending all this money specifically on this one drain? And I'm not speaking on the 632, so basically the construction in front of 648 and 660, if there is no runoff.
There is, I mean, we've had engineers look at this and design this. This is an identified area by our task force, by our engineer. Many years, I grew up at 680 Bear Road. I've been at Spoonwood Circle, Contention after storms. I mean, this area is a problem area, and it's deemed important enough that we've received multiple grants for it.
So I've shared the video of actually a storm and the runoff, or the lack of runoff for it. I shared that with the email before this. Have you all viewed it?
We've all received your information, yes.
So are you seeing runoff that I'm not seeing then? Because there was none. And it was a storm.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You said you got some pictures?
Yeah, here.
Let me see them. Again, I'm the new kid I'm the new kid on the block, okay? But what you're saying, I understand. That's duplicates. Okay. So if I'm understanding you right.
No, that's a PowerPoint copy.
So if I'm understanding you right, the project that Steve is talking about, which is where me and you had our, okay. So I know where I'm at now. If what you're saying is that this runoff is also coming into where they put the water filtration stuff in, it's not really doing anything compared to where this runoff is coming in. Am I correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
So the second page I've highlighted, this is from Jacobs. I put like a big blue area. So the water comes off the drain, and then for about 45 yards, it's above ground, and it's saturated into the ground over those 45 yards. So it's already being infiltrated. And I'm not talking about the full Bear Road project, which you can see on the next page. I'm just talking about, why are we building infiltration systems for 632, 640 if the water's already being infiltrated? We have videos showing that, like, no water is hitting that Trout Creek area that runs off into Spoonwood either. I'm not saying to stop the other thing. I'm just saying this specific, the 640 and 640 or 660, 648 construction, there's absolutely no purpose for it, and it's wasteful.
I think that when we designed this system, like we said, is the first outfall, the areas we're doing the large percentage. I don't know the percentage. I have to look back at the numbers, but maybe it's 80% of this project is all on that lower half of there, which run from like 545 to 585 Bear Road. And there's a whole series of underground systems that will be installed. And that is the main focus, because that's where that major part of flooding was. And we basically had the look to say, let's go above and beyond, let's try to address some additional runoff. Like I said, there's multiple outfalls on Bear Road, there's multiple outfalls on Margot Lane, as there are throughout most of our neighborhoods. In this area, they all have different pipe outfalls into that swale behind your house, the stream channel that flows down. So there's a lot of different outfalls, and they do flow. It just depends on the intensity of the rainfall and basically the duration. In smaller storms, they might soak in or they might go underneath the leaf litter and you might not see very much flow. In larger ones, you're going to certainly see them, and it depends on the drainage area to each one. We're not saying, and we've never said, that it's not an important thing that there might be other issues going on. We have a lot of issues with stormwater. That's kind of how we got to where we are today. We're spending a lot of time and a lot of money to do stormwater projects, and this project started as a grant project for that area of Bear Road from 545 to 580, and it still takes water that comes down the hill from your neighborhood as well. So it is intercepting some of that water and reducing some of that from getting to that lower area. So I think the important thing to think is it does make a difference. It does help. It reduces more water getting to that lower outfall by taking it and infiltrating it up higher. And it's a great first step for a project to do some good, measurable work here in this part of the watershed.
648. So this is right in front of, I have a vested interest here.
Well, thank you. I think, as we go forward with our stormwater planning, we can consider Margot Lane and look at those outfalls further.
So you would, and even though we have just show this, so again, going back, so we're comfortable doing this construction without having township people. We've raised this, we have video evidence that the water's getting infiltrated. You're good moving forward with spending the money without actually having someone from the township or Jacobs go on the ground to double check this.
We have had the engineers and Jacobs engineer this entire project. You're talking about the Margot Lane one.
No.
They haven't yet visited that.
But they haven't been on the property to see the runoff that or lack of runoff that we've highlighted.
So if I'm understanding you right, you're saying you've asked for I'm just saying the supervisor, I'm using that word. You've asked for supervisors or engineers or someone to come out and look at this, and what you're saying is nobody's ever came and
Margot Lane, because we can highlight, we've asked them to take a look at the whole thing because it runs down directly to Trout.
Okay.
So
I'm going to say this. I have nothing to do this week. I'm off.
Yeah, come on down.
And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up tomorrow. I'm going to put my clothes on. I'm going to put this in my little GPS so I know I'm making the right turns.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come and look at this. After this meeting, me and you will have a conversation. I'll get your name completely and I'll get your phone number and I'll call you and you can show me where this is.
Cool.
I will do that. I can't promise you anything else, but I will do that.
Is there any way we could do it Thursday, not tomorrow?
What time on Thursday?
You call the time.
Okay, we'll do it
Cool.
Thursday.
Yeah,
Because I will do, as a supervisor, and I know what we're doing, I will come and look at this to say that we are concerned, because I'm concerned about stormwater where I live at. I'm in the Panhandle. So I understand what you're talking about as far as stuff getting in there. I will make it my point to meet you and we can look at this.
Cool.
Actually, I want to add one thing, because you keep saying no one's been out there. Just let me finish.
Yeah.
I let you talk. So we haven't been out there when you've been there, but Steve and I drove that whole project in a pretty good rainstorm to see where the water was going, and we were quite comfortable that this was a good idea. So it's not like, I mean, just because we didn't see you doesn't mean we haven't driven that whole thing, crowd run. We didn't violate property rights and go in people's backyards too much, but we did a little of that.
And I've also gone out, I've been in those woods, Spoonwood Circle, I've walked that multiple times. And I mean, I lived in those woods, but I've been out with Steve also. So this project that we're talking about has had a lot of eyes on it.
But have you got, like, and I'm not taking it, so I'm talking about being on the property to watch the runoff go actually into the Trout Creek runoff. Yeah, and there's no doubt that water goes there, but that's the ask.
Drove the street, we walked every single inch that's going to be torn up and exactly where it's going to be done in a pretty good, like, we got wet, like, rainstorm for sure. And I think it makes sense. Like, I hear there's lots of other places in the township where they're going to do other projects.
But going back to the video where it is a rainstorm and you don't see any water hitting the runoff, like, that's what we're talking about. That's not contributing to the flooding on Trout Creek.
There was water going into all the drains when we were there. Like, every one of the sewer inlets was getting water into them.
But then that's pushing down, so that's not being directly pumped in, that's going across the land and already being infiltrated for 45 yards. So that's what I'm saying. It's not like the Margot Road is a direct pipe that goes in.
All of that water ends up down there. You reduce it, it's going to make a difference. Little bit, all these projects together.
If you want to come Thursday, it sounds like we're going to have a party anyway. So, like, happy to have other people here as well.
Can I ask you, sir, and forgive me because these folks have walked it, I've just driven by occasionally. What would you have done? What do you want done? Nothing? You're saying that we're spending $1 million for nothing, or whatever we're spending for
I'm talking about
township money.
Go ahead.
So what would you want done?
I would probably reinvest the construction of the 2 infiltration units that are supposed to go into 648, 660, somewhere in the lower level line areas, because we're showing you that there's no runoff, there's no...
Well, this goes back, so as was said
or at least
here
begin
before,
investing it.
we have this major project. This has been discussed for years. That doesn't mean other projects won't be done. There are, unfortunately, it's not an infinite amount of money we have, but we do get grants that are looked upon by third parties and examined, and we get the money because people believe in those. That doesn't mean that other things won't be done. Maybe your project will be done if it is deemed to be, of that effect, to be of that great a need. This project was deemed that, and that's where we are.
I'd probably go after, sorry, to answer your question again, I'd probably go after the Margot Lane 2-foot runoff that's causing the 5-foot erosion. That's like where I try and remediate that issue straight out of the bat, since that's all pushing directly down and the root cause of it. And if you want to come over Thursday, happy to show it. I think just getting people in the eye on the amount of erosion that's occurring in some areas and not, it's startling.
I think there's a lot of places in the township that are startling. But thank you for your input. Thanks.
I was going to say, the other piece of this is that it has to do with money and the time to be able to get it in. And we don't have, if I'm just going to say this, if you can figure out how to get us another $2 million.
I'm sorry.
That's the other piece of the pie. It does have to do with money, but I'm very serious in the fact that I will come and look. I may not be able to do anything, I may not be able to change anything, but as a supervisor, I'm coming to look because that is my job, to see what you're talking about. That is my job.
Cool.
So I will do that.
Try to go when it rains. It is a better time to go.
Thursday.
Yeah. Good. I hope it rains Thursday. All right. Yes. Thanks. Any other public comment?
Mr. Chairman, you have someone virtual as well. It's been had their hand up for a while, so, yep, okay.
It's a popular subject, so I think I'd like to just say a couple things as well, just further to what Christian has talked about here. Mine's coming at it from a little bit different angle, and I understand you have lots of experts that have come in, and there's been a lot of
I'm sorry, we need your name and address.
Sorry, my bad. It's Brent Yance. I live at 660 Bear Road. And so with that, let me just let you know a little bit more about me. So because I think it contributes to why I'm having this conversation. So the company that I work for, the portfolio that I'm responsible for, contains a business in it, which is a $1.7 billion water filtration business. Now in that business, I have an abundance of engineers, specialists, and PhD scientists that do nothing but work on purification, processing, and really relevant to this discussion, the handling and disbursement of water. So I tell you that because I think it's relevant to the discussion. So with that, my concern is this. Number one, the infiltration system that is proposed is going to be installed mostly under the road and in the right-of-way. If you look at any of the science behind infiltration systems, one of the major contributing factors to them not being affected is compacted soil. If the infiltration system is going to be in the road, you just talked about construction of roads, etc. A road will fail if it doesn't have an appropriate foundation, which is compacted. So my concern is this: if you want an infiltration system and not a containment system, then you have to consider that aspect of the construction. So again, I don't know if a lot of work's been done. Sounds like the decisions are already made, but I do want it logged in the public record that that is a major concern. I have one other concern, and that is simply, let's say it defies the science in construction, and it actually works, and it infiltrates the water. I think as a homeowner, I'm entitled to the infiltration rate, because that will determine how quickly that water is infiltrated, and I'd also like to understand the expected disbursement area. And I want to know that. Now it gets personal for me, but every homeowner should be concerned about this. I want to know that because my house is 70 years old. Several years ago, we renovated the basement down to cinder block and concrete slab. Not one element of evidence that water had ever penetrated my basement. I'm going to have a 12,000 gallon containment tank 45 feet from my foundation. If I get water in my basement, I think I'm going to know where it's coming from. And in addition to that, I know how to sample and identify where the origin of that water comes from. So I understand the testing procedures as well. So I just want it logged because I want stormwater taken care of. I'm not against your proposals. I get it. But don't try to solve a problem and cause a problem, is all I'm saying. So I've asked for this information, right, a couple times, and all I've heard is just, it's approved, we're doing it, we've got a grant, it's going forward. Okay, cool, but understand it's a concern, and it shouldn't just be mine, but for me personally, it's mine right now. So I just wanted to log that with you guys. I wanted to be in the public record, and then, if we go forward, and nothing happens, fantastic. We've got some water, storm drainage taken care of. But if I experience issues, I will relentlessly go after to remediate those issues. And I just want you guys to know. Any questions?
Well, we understand what you're saying.
I do have a question. You said you asked for the information and you still have not received it? Is that what, I understood you saying?
So what I'm referring to, she asked me the question right first. So you asked me the question. So what I'm referring to is I believe I have at least 3 emails, and we've had one video conference call where it was referenced with Mr. Burgo, where it was, and the person from Jacobs, I don't recall his name, sorry, where it was referenced that multiple studies have taken place, there's data that supports the decisions, et cetera. I just asked, like, could I understand that data? Like, it would be helpful for me to know, because again, when you put an infiltration system in, if you core and dig and test the soil in one spot or a few spots, but you don't do it precisely where that infiltration system's going to be, you don't know the makeup of that soil. You can't judge the soil from 100 feet away for how it's going to, if it's porous, compacted, all the different elements that make this successful. You can't judge that from that. So I can tell you there's been no cores, soil samples taken on my property, and I'm going to have one 45 feet from my foundation.
So I guess, I just want to start, just from a general standpoint, we'll go back in time a little bit. We had a public meeting here in this room on the 23rd of January. So we sent notices out to everybody within the project limits on Bear Road, as well as folks on Contention Lane, even downstream residents on Hickory who have had flooding. So we did have a number of residents, 14 or 15, who attended that meeting. We did have individual Zoom Teams meetings with Mr. Johnson and Mr. Shea on their particular each, I think on February 8th. We did have a follow-up meeting to our public meeting here on the 13th. It was a Zoom call where we did a follow-up. We had presentations at both of the public meeting and the February 13th meeting, and we did address a number of those questions and concerns on those things. Those presentations are on our website. We talked about the idea of where the water goes when it goes into the ground. Look, I've been involved in underground stormwater infiltration for years. I've heard just about every different thing imaginable. It's not the same, and like just professionally, it's not the same as water filtration. It's different. We have done, Jacobs, our team, has done representative soil testing. They didn't test every single property, but they tested along the way. And yes, there can be variations. We see that all the time with professional designers who come into this township for land development applications, for stormwater and grading permits. They don't test every single solitary location across the property trying to find it. The soils in those areas can be representative of a particular soil classification. So we did test. Jacobs did have their values. They took values that they used conservatively for these designs for dewatering of the systems. These systems have two functions. They can infiltrate water back into the ground, and they can also store water, collect it and store it, and slowly release it downstream, which it does into the overflow into the system, so we have less flooding during an actual storm event. So it's both volume reduction by infiltration, and it's also peak rate reduction. These systems, to answer the other question, under the roadway and under parking lots, driveways, that has been done for years and years and years. And there's plenty of background on that from an engineering and science standpoint that they can work, because they're actually down deeper below that surface, and those are uncompacted soils that they're putting that in. We have them in our township roadways, under our roadways. We've had them there for more than 10 years. No problems in those systems. School district just put a huge one in their parking lot that takes almost 90% of the parking lot. It's been going on for years and years and years. Businesses put them under their parking areas that are driven. We have, going back in the history, we've done work with the Turnpike when they were looking at stormwater. There's places like the Long Island Expressway, the Seattle-Tacoma airport runways. They use them all over the place. It is one of the best ways to collect and manage water where it's produced. We've heard a lot about water being produced. The roadway produces a lot of water. Residents' properties, their driveways and their downspouts dump into the roadway as well. Some of it's collected. It might go down the outlet to the pipe. Some of it misses those because of when we were out there driving, you could see the stream of water. It doesn't all get into those inlets. Some of it makes it down to the areas where we have flooding. But it is scientifically engineering. It's a sound practice. We've used it. Numerous people all over the region have used it, and all over the country use underground infiltration to do stormwater. So it is a proven technology. It does work. It will collect and store and reduce the water downstream. Our consultants from Jacobs have looked at that and considered. There's more than, I think it's like 50 feet that they identified from the proximity to the frontage of the house for any of these properties. that meets or exceeds our ordinance requirements. That was one of the things they were tasked with doing too, to make sure that it's far enough away from the foundation wall. And there's other things that they can also do. They can also they could put a liner if they wanted to, an impermeable liner to keep it from going into the grass, but most of their evaluations have said that water dissipates before it actually gets anywhere near that level of the property. So I understand your concerns. They're all valid concerns in regards of your house and your basement. We've heard those from other folks on Bear Road, and we've had the design team working to address those concerns. This is the smaller percentage of water, as we've heard, going to these drainage areas are smaller than the lower areas. So it's less water going in these systems, but it's still water. So we think it will be good.
And he asked about the infiltration rates. Do we have that actual data?
Right.
We have data from their testing. Yeah, they do have the testing results for what they did on Bear Road. And they also, when the contractor go out there, they'll also be verifying things in the field as well when they actually do the install as well.
So can we just share that with this gentleman when we
If you feel the right to know, we can get the information you're requesting.
That'd be great. That's really what I'm asking for. I appreciate the history on infiltration, but again, if the system works and it's effective and it doesn't impact the homeowners, because again, right, like we're not putting a containment system in. The townships own the right-of-way at the road, and then I don't know how many, 5 feet on either side or whatever. I get that. That's your right-of-way, and you should do with it as you wish, and we don't really have control over that. But it's not a containment system. It's a collection system and a disbursement system. And so you are collecting water from the road, and you are dispersing that into our properties, right? So again, keep that in mind. If it was a collection system, I wouldn't even be at this meeting tonight, because you're putting in pipes, you're going to route the water somewhere, whatever. No big deal, whatever. It's going to be inconvenient with the construction. But that's not the case. You are collecting the water, 12,000 gallons in front of my house, and you're going to disperse that into our property. Now I have a concern, right?
And like we said, is our consultants have looked at that and they've evaluated those concerns. So from what we've heard from Jacobs, they are like, and what we said is we've done these types of projects on Friendship Drive, on Hilltop, Dalesview, Robbins Lane's been in since 2009. There's been numerous situations, and we have residents every single day submitting stormwater and grading permits to put underground stormwater systems around their houses for redevelopment projects that they do. And their engineers will, come in every single time and try to inch those systems closer and closer to the houses, even though we tell them to move them further back away from the houses. So it is something that we've worked on for years. There are measures of how you design it and how you lay it out like anything else, but we think we're confident that what Jacobs has laid out will work and it will do a good job and it's not going to have adverse impacts.
Thank you. And in terms of the data, I think if you fill out a right-to-know request, we'll get you the data you want.
Okay, sure. Can you get that off of your site, or where would you get that form?
On the website.
On the website.
Yep.
Sorry?
On the website.
On the website?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, guys.
We have an online comment.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name's John Chambers. I live at 594 Contention Lane. Chairman Miller, members of the board, thank you for hearing this issue. Given the hour, I think we have the opportunity to be frank. The previous speaker, to whom I cannot attest his expertise, I can attest to the expertise that Mr. Burgo and his consultants bring. The previous speakers have mentioned and spoken about ifs. Myself and my neighbors can speak about what is, and that is existential types of flooding damaging our property currently. This is not something that may happen or could happen, or if there's a problem, might happen. This is happening. So what I would ask the board to consider is, in my view, we have very transparent redirection, a not in my backyard, or probably better put, not in my front yard type of complaint and redirection to Margo Lane when the engineers for the township and the consultant firm have clearly identified the cause of the problem and the resolution to the problem. So with that, I will appreciate you taking my comments.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'm John Mercer, 540 Contention Lane. Just wanted to quickly offer, I am going to be working from home Tuesday and Thursday this week. If anyone wants to go there and walk the property and see some of the erosion, they're absolutely welcome to stop by, ring the doorbell, and we can go for a walk. That's it.
Could you restate your address, please?
Absolutely. It's 540 Contention Lane.
And are you in favor of this project or opposed?
Absolutely in favor. It's one of my old mentors used to say, don't let great be the enemy of good. I think there's a lot of valid points that got brought up, but what we have on hand is, I think, an unequivocally net good for the safety of our community and for the environment, so absolutely in favor.
Thank you. Any other comments? Board comments at all? We're done?
Yes. As goes the extra water that all comes down Contention Lane. I live in the neighborhood that's at the bottom of all that. I'm the second house off Contention Lane, right before you go over the bridge. And that water that comes down there and that goes into the creek is part of what contributes to so much of the flooding that we have on Old State Road. And that it goes down and it also stays on Contention Lane. We had to have a water rescue from there a couple of years ago. And when you look at it, when it's dry, it doesn't look like it's going to flood like that, but it did. Down Contention Lane where Trout Creek crosses. So then it keeps going down Old State Road and they get severe flooding down there as well. It's all the water that's wiped out the baseball field there at Clark Field. So I understand the volume that's coming down, and I've been to Spoonwood Circle and looked at all the erosion there as well. So I hear you.
My name's Ann Murphy. I live at 5 Berkshire Terrace. I participated in the Zoom meeting, I think it was February, that was online with the residents. And all that information that was requested about, the percolation rates was in the presentation by Andy Potts. I think 4 out of 5 are really good rates. And they also talked about the zone of disbursement. It was fairly minimal, maybe like 10 feet or, it's nothing like 50 feet. And the other thing I think they should realize is these systems are like holding the first inch of rain. It's not like, whereas if you have your stormwater on your property, they're trying to infiltrate 3 inches of rain. So it's a very sort of a light infiltration and then an overflow to the existing stormwater system. So it's designed to be wide and less impactful. So we're in favor of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Any other public comment?
Good evening. I'm Chad Morris over on Contention. We've lived there for 37 years. Many developers come before you to get approval, and they say that the amount of stormwater is only going to increase by this much from their development. Well, after 37 years, it's a raging, roaring river. My neighbor who spoke with you just a minute ago, Mr. Chambers, has some pipes that extend from his front yard into the creek. All that land is gone. All gone. It's all erosion. It went down your way and right all the way to Gateway, and then all the rest of the homes on down. Mr. Burgo and I have walked up there. Others have walked up there. I know all of you, many of you have been up there. And you've already always seen, all that water that just goes right out. And now it pours in here where this man lives. He sees it. He knows the trench. He hasn't been there but a year, but I've seen it go from nothing to a very deep and wide trench. And it all heads down. So please, we've talked about this for 6 years. Please vote the way I would certainly like you to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? We're ready for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to reject the bids for the Warner Spur Bridge Repair Project and to reauthorize staff to re-advertise and receive bids. Mr. Burgo.
Chairman Miller and members of the board, on April 4th, 2024 at 1 p.m., the township received bids from qualified contractors for the Warner Spur Bridge Replacement Project. 6 bids were received and reviewed by township staff. After review of those bids, JMC Construction was the apparent lowest qualified bidder. Subsequently, on April 5th, 2024, the township received a letter of withdrawal and explanation from JMC indicating that they had made a substantial error in their bidding on item 1-12 in the amount of $200,000. This letter of withdrawal was reviewed by the township solicitor, and he had indicated to the township staff that this was they were legally entitled to withdraw their bid because of the timing of the letter and their explanation. So with the acceptance of that letter of withdrawal from JMC, all the remaining bids, were actually over the township's anticipated project budget of $584,200 for construction and inspection services for this project. So therefore, the township is requesting the board to reject all the bids received on 4/4/24 via pen bid. And then we're also going to ask this evening for reauthorization so we can put this project back out to re-advertise and receive bids from contractors. We will be utilizing our project budget this time and adding that to the bid because it's a rebid, just so we know that the contractors rebidding are not going to exceed the amount. If anybody has any questions, I can certainly answer them.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Burgo. Do I have a motion to approve? Second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment or questions? Public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to ratify and approve stormwater best management practices and conveyance operation and maintenance agreement between Tredyffrin Township, Tredyffrin East Town School District, and PennDOT. Ms. Koopman.
Thank you, Chairman. So as previewed by Mr. Martin in item E, as part of the school district's already approved plans for the improvements at Conestoga's athletic fields, there are a series of stormwater facilities and other improvements that are intended for Cassatt Road. Cassatt Road is a state road, and it requires a PennDOT highway occupancy permit to be submitted in order to complete those improvements. According to PennDOT regulations, the school district is not able to be the permittee. The township has to be the permittee. So this agreement, which we are asking you to ratify, it has already been signed by staff, allows the township to be the applicant on this application. However, all the responsibilities for the improvements will be on the school district.
Thank you, Ms. Koopman. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comment? Any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve the developer agreement, financial securities agreement, and stormwater best practices O&M agreement between Tredyffrin Easttown School District and Tredyffrin Township. Ms. Koopman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, this is the same project. It's the previously approved land development for the athletic fields at Conestoga. These documents, the developer agreement, the financial security agreement, and the stormwater best practices O&M agreement are all sort of the rules of the game for proceeding with the development. And they've been prepared by us and reviewed by all the parties. We ask that you approve them tonight so that they will allow the project to proceed and for the township to be able to protect its rights going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Koopman. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any comments from the board? Any public comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to approve proposal from Simon Collins for Friendship Park Master Plan. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Excuse me. Tonight I'm requesting approval from the proposal from Simone Collins for Master Plan of Friendship Park. Cost is $39,302.50. I've been working with the Parks Board on this and looking forward to getting this started. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duraco. Do we hear a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say I had brought this up at last month's meeting and explained how the board has been looking at Friendship Park and what would be needed to improve it. If you haven't been there recently, it's been in bad shape for a long time. On the eastern half, the walking paths are broken up such that they don't even come together anymore. As you go downhill on one area, it's all broken up as well. and to bring it to, if we redo this, and we can't repave and fix everything unless we also make it ADA compliant. So that would involve on the Friendship Drive side, turning that entrance to have to, instead of just going straight up, that it would have a switchback path to come back up. And so we've also been looking into what we can do to make the park more useful to our residents. Thank you.
And if that chain link fence remains, I am going to be PO'd. That thing has to go.
Double chain link it is.
With that, any public comment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion to authorize capital purchase of zero-turn mower for Public Works. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Staff is requesting the board's approval for the purchase of a new zero-turn mower. This mower is to replace the mower that is currently out on municipal bid. The cost for this purchase is $19,190.20, which includes a 20% government discount from Berwyn Lawn Mower. This purchase was included in the 2024 budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any comment from the board? Any public comment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize capital purchase of skid steer for Public Works. Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Staff is requesting the board's approval for the purchase of a new skid steer. This skid steer is to replace a 2008 Bobcat skid steer. The new skid steer will be from Foley Cat and includes a 24-inch road planer, front bucket, and forks. Some of the attachments from the current skid steer will be able to be used with the new skid steer. The price of this purchase from Coley under the state contract is $99,300, which was included in the 2024 budget. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a
Second.
Any comment from the board? Any public comment?
I do. What's a skid steer?
Oh, geez.
What is it?
The skid steer is a small front end loader, like on tracks. Yeah. Well, it depends on what you're doing with it.
Yeah, no, it's, yeah. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize Tredyffrin Public Library building security upgrades. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Tonight, we're seeking approval of a proposal from, I believe it's Valley Forge Building Security. They do a lot of our work. It's a CoStar's price. It's $38,704. This will update the library's building security access and cameras are included in that. It's included in the budget as well.
Thank you, Mr. Duraco. Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any questions from the board?
No questions, just a comment. This is important. It's about time. This is
Oh
an
my
old
God.
system we have there. And, you know, this is just part of keeping staff and library users safe. So I'm glad we're doing this. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. I would concur. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize additional funding for fire station located at 23 Bridge Avenue in Berwyn. Mr. Duraco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The memo that I've written for the board covers the next three agenda items, so that way I'll just kind of talk about it now and then. In November of last year, the board approved the joint resolution and intermunicipal agreement with Easttown and Berwyn Fire Company. We'd been working on that for, quite a few months last year. But, we finally approved it in November. Included in that was approval of a project for 23 Bridge Avenue Firehouse, not to exceed $9 million. As things have progressed, we've received updated bids, updated numbers from the fire company. The project now, construction costs is a little over $10 million, of which the township's responsible for 70% of. What we're seeking authorization and approval for tonight is a project, essentially an updated project budget, which would result in the township share of it being $8,181,497. Part of that will be funded by grants, the RACP being 1.4 million is our share. Berwyn is also able to secure another grant from Congressman Houlihan, of which our share would be $350,000. So $1.75 million of that would be grant funded. The township issued bonds. Originally, we had planned to use 3.15 million. With some other savings in projects, we're able to increase that bond proceeds use to a little over $4 million. In the original budget, we had planned to use 1.75 million of general fund reserves. That stays. And then the remaining funding, a little under $700,000 of this budget would essentially be a loan from the general fund to the emergency services fund, which then will need to be repaid back, in future years through additional millage. The other portion of our request tonight is to authorize staff to work with the solicitor's office to update and to update our intermunicipal agreement and our resolution with Easttown. That way it properly reflects the funding. And then the last portion, given that, again, this is an ever-changing environment and we're getting ready to go into construction, we've outlined in my memo how to proceed with change orders so that way we can make this as efficient as possible when we're in the field and things come up. I'm happy to answer any questions on my memo. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. DeRocco. One thing I'd like to add for the public hearing the large increase or the reasonably sized increase, part of it's just inflation. I mean, it's a year later that we're bidding it. Part of it is scope creep. So we've added a significant area in the building for dormitories for overnight staff. So that's by $360,000, $380,000 of the increase. As a township project, there's different wage rates that we have to pay versus an outside, a private, a nonprofit like the fire company. So there's wage creep that went into it also. And then the last thing is the Easttown Historic Society wanted a different facade on the building, just a different look. It's going to be there for 100 years. I mean, I guess they care what it looks like, which I don't blame them. So that added a significant piece of money or cost to the project. So it's not all, I mean, we as a township or townships have added scope to this project, which is part of the increase here, just so people understand what's happened, if that makes sense.
And the facade is that increase is only to be paid by Easttown. We are not responsible for that increase in costs.
No, thank you. Thank you. That's a good point. Yep. With that, I hear a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And any comment from the board? Any public comment?
Ray Clark. I was just trying to total up the increases as Joe was talking here. It seems like there's an extra $1 million of bond money, an extra 700 grand of a loan, and an extra 300 grand that we're getting from a grant. So the project has increased by $2 million on 8. Is that about right? And that's before the facade, which Easttown is paying for.
Correct. We're also included in my numbers, Ray, is a contingency for construction. The bids themselves didn't include any contingency. So the idea is our project manager, who's going to be essentially running this project from here on out, it's a pretty standard thing to have. So it includes overall, it's $1.1 million of contingency. So we're hopeful that from here on out, we won't need to use it, but it's included in the budget. So that way we're not constantly coming back to, and holding things up for the project.
So I'm kind of understanding from all of this that we're trying to get some control over it, right? That's after a pretty substantial increase.
Yeah, Ray, not trying. I mean, Dave, our guy is going to be supervising this project all the time. I mean,
So who's that
well,
guy?
jointly with the fire company. He's not here.
He's one of our staff members.
Okay, an employee?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, it was kind of difficult to figure out exactly what was going on.
It's a little under, right now as it stands, the project budget went from 9 million to 11.965 million. So it's a little under $12 million project. So
Right.
yeah, a little under a three.
And that
$3 million.
includes the East Town facade?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Any other public comment? Okay, ready for vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize change order process for 23 Bridge Avenue project. Mr. DeRocco, and you talked about some of this, so let's.
Yeah, so just a little bit more detail. Our joint fire subcommittee with East Town, we worked out a process. Anything under $10,000 will be able to be approved in the field by our project manager, Dave Duda. Anything more than $10,000 but less than $25,000, Dave will present it to the township managers. Generally, would assume that Dave would approve it, deny it. If he approves it, the township managers at their discretion will be able to approve up to $25,000. And then anything over $25,000 will have to come back in front of the boards to get approval for.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Do we hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any comment from the board? Any public comment? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion to authorize staff to work with solicitor on updated joint resolution and intermunicipal agreement with Easttown Township and the Berwyn Fire Company. Mr. DeRocco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I mentioned, this is just to formalize what the board just approved and then make sure that our document matches. And so we should have that hopefully at our next board meeting.
That should be pretty straightforward. Do I hear a motion?
So, second.
Any comment from the board? Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we go on to new matters. Board member new matters. Sharon.
Thank you.
Or Miss.
Thank you. I wanted to ask for Parks and Recreation Board member Jamie Godfrey to be reappointed to the Parks and Recreation Board. He's been a member for the last 3 years, and he's been very involved and a great voice. And so we'd like to have more of him. So I am making a motion to reappoint Jamie Godfrey to the Parks and Recreation Board.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Any supervisor comment? Any public comment? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Jamie. Any other board member new matters? Any citizen new matters? This is your time.
My name is Meredith Brunel. I'm a township resident. I live on Forest Hill Circle. I'll be brief. I know it's late. This isn't about history or natural forces, but it is about quality of life in the township, something that concerns me greatly, and I know I'm not the only one. The issue is the noise from gas-powered leaf blowers. I know I rarely spend extended time in my yard anymore because inevitably one will start up in my neighborhood. As soon as one stops, another will start up. Sometimes the landscape service will arrive with 2 or 3 going at once. It's pretty impossible to ignore the noise. The nature of the noise is whining and loud and penetrating. Even if you're in your house, you can hear it. So there's really no escaping the noise, and it's pervasive and constant. And I don't know when it became normal that we all have to listen to this noise all the time from basically February to December. So I know a lot of other townships in the country have implemented phase-outs of these gas-powered blowers. There's electric blowers on the market that are effective and affordable. So I think our township could do something similar, a phase-out over a few years, something reasonable. And I guess that's pretty much it. I just want to voice my concern over the issue, and I'd like to request that the board consider implementing a phase-out I don't know anybody that when asked would say they like the sound of a gas-powered leaf blower, so I don't know why we can't do something about it. I think we can, and that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you. You're not the first person to come here with that complaint, and it's definitely on our list. I'm not promising we'll get to it super fast, but it's definitely on our list of things to worry about, so thank you.
Okay, great, thank you.
I know the EAC has talked about it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm
you
sorry.
can consider going to an EAC meeting. We've sent people there before. I know that it's been discussed. I don't know the status
I
of
did
it.
go, and they
Okay.
told me to come here, so.
Okay, good. All right. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
And sorry, I'm Richard Brunel. I'm Meredith's husband. But we are speaking a lot about best practices. I have seen some stuff on about best practices, and instead of trying to reinvent the wheel when we try to put an ordinance regarding leaf blowers, for example, there are some states on the West Coast that have been very progressive to ban those kind of machines. And I think that would be nice to just copy what they have done and just try to implement exactly the same thing and move fast, rather than to move in 10 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry to delay the end of the meeting. A quick announcement about the Conservancy. I'm sorry Bhaskar left before I could tell him about how to find the parking lot for Lorimer Preserve. I would want to needle him about Google Maps, but anyway. Just a quick announcement about our annual meeting, May the 1st at 7 p.m. at the Great Valley Presbyterian Church on Sweetsford Road. The important thing about it, our keynote speaker is the chair of the Township Environmental Advisory Council, Professor John Wilson. You heard his students give the really cool presentation on the water quality and forest health in Krabby Creek. I've heard him do a kind of an expanded version of that. It's really great, and I encourage all the residents to come and hear from him and hear about all the great things that the Conservancy is doing. May the 1st, 7 p.m., Great Valley Presbyterian Church. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Mr. Clark? Yes. I received my envelope from Open Land Conservancy this week and opened it up and saw that about the presentation. And I wondered, is he giving the same presentation that he gave to us, or is there going to be new material?
It's basically new material, well, expanded material.
Okay.
And kind of much more, I would say, rich in terms of the content, in terms of getting at some of the problems that they were looking at and some of the messages that came from what they found. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Any other citizen new matters? Do we hear a motion to adjourn the meeting? Your second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carried.